O'Hara. I want to welcome everybody for the, especially with the weather the way it's been, for coming out here tonight. We're here to honor the 50th anniversary of the McDonnell Gemini capsule in NASA's space program. I have a few announcements to make, with some sad news before we get started, unfortunately. I don't know if I'm, okay, there we go. Chester Braun, I just got this condolence the other day in the email, passed away. I'm going to read here real quick. He was Osprey, Florida, formerly of New Jersey, passed away on June 8th, 2015. He was a wonderful husband and devoted father and grandfather. One son, Gary, predeceased Chester, survived by his wife Elizabeth Braun, son C.V. Braun Jr., daughter-in-law Martha, and granddaughters Lee and Alexandra. With World War II in progress, Chet graduated from West Point and received training as an Army Air Force pilot. While serving, he helped map Korea and the reconnaissance squadron. After leaving the service, he became a test pilot for Republic Aviation and later for McDonnell Aircraft, which later became McDonnell Douglas and then Boeing. While at McDonnell, he worked his way up from test pilot of early model jet aircraft to vice president and general manager of modern fighters such as the F-4 Phantom and F-15 Eagle. Chet encouraged his wife and two sons to all earn their pilot's licenses, and both sons joined him as employees of McDonnell Douglas for a time. Chet retired from industry to Florida, where he earned a ship's master's license and enjoyed boating, tennis, and dressage. He achieved excellence in the Florida equestrian world by winning many awards with his thoroughbred Prince Secret Ice, grandson to the Triple Crown champion Secretariat. Chet is sorely missed by family and friends and has left an invaluable legacy of love, dedication, industriousness, and high ethical standards to his children and grandchildren. A remembrance service will be held at a later date. Farley Funeral Home in Venice is in charge of arrangements. In lieu of flowers, donations may be made to the Nature Conservancy, the West Point Society, or the Venice, Florida Presbyterian Church. And they have a link to the funeral home. So it says here at the end note, Bill Ross took his place when he retired. So I imagine there's a lot of McDonnell people out here tonight, obviously right here at the table, our honored guests. And so please remember their family in your prayers. Another person here, retiree James F. Siller. Anybody know him? Worked in labs. Died on Friday, June 5th. His memorial services will be this Saturday, June 20th at 10 a.m. at the Church of the Shepherd in St. Charles, Missouri. So I hate to bring the sad news up when we start, but I wanted to let you guys know about that. Also, and I'm sure you guys heard in the news, Jim Hansen, Hansen's Tree Service, was tragically killed in a plane crash earlier this week, along with his beloved dog, Daisy. So please remember their family in your prayers also. I really don't know where to begin tonight, I'll be honest with you. So many great things have happened to bring this night together in such a manner. For example, and I don't know if Ben Abel, are you here tonight? Okay. He would have been the representative from MacArthur's Bakery. MacArthur's has always been really good to us. When we've had events such as this, they've always done a wonderful cake. And so we actually went to them and said, would you mind donating a cake? And they did. And it's actually new owners. I did not know that Randy MacArthur had sold the company back last November. So it's just wonderful that they did that. And we have a secret gift for our panelists later tonight. I'm not going to tell you what it is right now, but it literally came all the way from England. And this all started about 6 days ago. So that's all I'm going to say about that right now. So you have to wait and wonder what it is. Okay, so we've got a slideshow, we got a short video, and we're going to do a panel discussion tonight. These men here are living history. 2 years ago, we did a 50th anniversary for Project Mercury. We had the same gentleman here, did an excellent panel. That video is on our website for Missouri Aviation Historical Society. You can go watch it on the YouTube channel. It's wonderful. So I said right then, I said, would you mind coming back in 2 years and we'll do Project Gemini? And they said, sure. So they didn't know what they're getting themselves into again. We actually met on Tuesday and went over all the questions, and it was great. How was the barbecue, by the way? Good? Okay. Stumpy's barbecue at St. Peter's is really good if you ever get a chance. So I'm going to get out of the way, and I'm going to turn it over to Earl Mullins, who's the founder and president of the Space Museum in Bonne Terre, and we'll get started. There you go.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much.
Slide over here.
All right. Very good.
Albert,
We,
real quick. Albert, the lights, do we want to do a dimming? Where'd Albert go? Albert, okay. Do it. You want me to? What do you think, Earl? Do you want the lights down and stuff? And everybody seems okay?
I'm fine. It really depends on the panelists.
Okay.
They're the ones that are on the spotlight here.
Well, it won't be totally dark, but...
They are, after all, brilliant.
Oh, that's right.
Brilliant. So I think that's appropriate. You guys won't live this down soon. You know that, don't you? Right. Yeah, okay.
Let's try it the way it is then.
Okay. If the lights get bothersome later, we can do something about it. It is a tremendous pleasure to see all of you here this evening, and usually as moderator or spokesman, you know, I have the privilege of introducing some very special people, and I think there is one in the crowd who has a few words to say, and we'll give her the floor in just a moment. But you know, you want to introduce dignitaries. Most of you I know, most of you are like family, and as far as I'm concerned, you're all dignitaries, and I decided that I'm just going to forego that because everybody that's anybody is here tonight, you know, in the aerospace community. So we're pleased that you came out. We're pleased that the weather didn't put you down. I would ask that you forgive my throat. Most people realize, who have heard me talk before, I don't usually have a whole lot of problem making myself heard or talking, but I have just been recuperating from a screaming respiratory infection. So I really kind of consider myself privileged to be here tonight. I do want you guys to know that I'm well out of the 7-day danger zone. I am no longer contagious. Okay, so if I spit on the microphone a little bit, you'll be okay, all right? All right, very good. Very, very good. Christine Noble is here from the did it wrong again. From the Space Frontier Society. Christine, I think you had a few words that you'd like to say.
Hi, everybody.
Come on up.
Okay, I got that teacher voice. I'm used to it. I know, I got a teacher voice. Hi, what are you doing?
Christine Noble from the St. Louis Space Frontier Society. Here you go.
Yeah. Hi, I'm used to using my teacher voice, so I'm willing to talk from anywhere. Hi, I'm here from the St. Louis Space Frontier Society. We are...
Here.
I can do it.
You can. It's just hold that up against that, and then it'll work fine. Mostly.
Oh my gosh, I'm putting it over here. Hey, hold that.
You have to find the right spot.
I'll just talk.
Okay, go ahead. All right.
All right, so I'm here to welcome you to the St. Louis Space
Duct tape,
Frontier.
Albert.
We can hear you now.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, Christine.
Oh, I'm used to that, Earl. So I would love to welcome you to the St. Louis Space Frontier Society. It is a chapter of the National Space Society. Some of you may realize that St. Louis Space Frontier was a chapter back in the 80s and 90s, and then we weren't around, and now we're back, and we're back in full force. We just won NSS Chapter of the Year award. Yay, all right. All right. And we have been awarded the International Space Development Conference for 2017. So in Memorial Day weekend, May 2017, we are going to be hosting about 1,000 people who are all really excited about space. And we're hoping that you'll put that on your save your date calendar. But before that, on the end of September, somebody's going to have to help me. It's the 4th Saturday. I can never remember the date. We are actually hosting a smaller conference called Gateway to Space at Boeing. 26th. Ron says it's the 26th of September. I can never remember that date. So I have a few postcards about our chapter if anyone would like to think about how people could live and work in space. We're going a little past the airplanes and all the way to space. All right, thanks. Sorry to have my back to you all. Sorry, sorry to have my back to everybody there. Okay, so if you want
Give us just a
postcards.
moment here.
We're going to put some 100-mile-an-hour tape on.
If it can't be fixed by duct tape, it can't be fixed.
And we really appreciate this program.
Yeah, yeah. Well, should I be like telling jokes or something now while we're waiting?
I think we have it.
Ooh, there you go.
Right.
All right, so.
We're actually gonna get through this. No problem. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, you got it? You got it? All right.
Do you realize, how many of you realize that duct tape was on the manifest of every shuttle flight? Every shuttle flight. Had it not been for duct tape, the Apollo 13 astronauts would probably not have survived. Did you know that? Sorry guys, but the engineers that designed the limb and the command module, they decided that the air scrubbers, the filters in the limb would be round, square, and the ones in the command module would be round. So they had to bring the ones out of the limb into the command module to get the carbon dioxide out of the air. So with a book cover, a sock, an air conditioning hose, and a roll of duct tape, they improvised so that they could get the carbon dioxide out of the air and survive their flight back home. So duct tape has been the backbone of the United States forever. So anyway. All right. Yes. Yes.
I'm going to try this now and see how it works. I'd like to introduce Paul Segura of Boeing. They have a contingent here tonight. They have a small history group at Boeing, and they're working on a very special project. One of the tragedies during the Gemini program occurred in February of 1966, so we're coming up on the 50th anniversary for that. The prime crew for Gemini 9 was Elliot C. and Charles Bassett, and unfortunately, when they flew up here to check out their capsule at the McDonnell aircraft plant, their T-38 crashed at Lambert Field, killing both of them. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul now so he can tell us about this project. You want to come use the mic?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kind of keep her bit there at the bottom.
Okay, thank you, Dan. So yes, again, my name is Paul Segura. I'm in engineering at the Boeing Company, and I'm also a member of the Boeing Historical Council. We've got a small team at Boeing that's a small history team, and some of our members are here this evening. We have, there's a number of us who have kind of retained this memory of this tragic incident that took place with the Gemini 9 crew. But there are a lot of... Can you hear me? Duct tape. How about that? Can you hear me now? Okay.
Right.
Testing?
Yes.
Okay. I'll try not to move around. Okay, so, but there's the vast majority, I would say, of people do not remember that. Okay, so we have been working with Henry Brownlee, who is our historian for the defense side of the Boeing Company, to try to come up with some sort of memorial for these two astronauts who gave their lives, okay, for the space program and for their country. We are also talking about planning some sort of ceremony as well to coincide with the 50th anniversary of when this event took place in February of 1966. So this would be next year. Now also, next year is the 100th anniversary of the Boeing Company as well. So from a historical perspective, this is a very special time for us.
Very good.
Okay, so I don't want to take up too much time. I'd like to thank Dan for giving us just a few moments to make this announcement. We have Matthew Stoff here tonight from our team, and he is available to, if you would like to tell us your story and to record that story, whether you do that tonight or at a separate time. You can see myself or see Matthew, and we can make those arrangements. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, listen, I don't think we need to really spend a whole lot of time on anything else. Dan, do you have other announcements or anyone that you would like to introduce or because we're really here to hear what these gentlemen have to say tonight, and we hope that we can get through this and make this microphone work, because they all have some very, very, very special stories. I've known most of these guys for a long, long time. Some of us have even slung drywall mud and put drywall up together. And I consider them incredibly special. Brilliant, actually. I consider them, yeah, no, you're not going to live that one down. I do. I consider them extremely special. Some of them, I won't say who because I don't want to embarrass them, but some have been helping with the Space Museum Annex. We're in an expansion mode right now, and we're moving into a new building. We're adding an additional 5,000 square feet. The youngest of the group, who is coming down and helping us put up 10-foot drywall, which weighs about 3 million pounds a sheet, is 82. The oldest one of the bunch is 85. They work me into the dirt every time they come. And I've always wondered what has really made these gentlemen special and the special people that they are. And it finally dawned on me, after having produced many, many blisters and wearing much drywall mud, it finally dawned on me what really makes them special. They're ordinary human beings, well educated, but what really makes them special is their tenacity and their heart. When they believe in something, they go at it full bore. They don't mess around. They don't quit. They overcome obstacles. They make it happen. And as I just kind of stood back the other day and was watching Earl Robb to do drywall, and Dean Purdy and Ray Tucker, and they were slinging this drywall mud and stuff, and Earl had so much of it on it, he was actually taller. But listen, I looked at those guys, and look, with all jokes aside, it just hit me. That's the spirit that took us to the moon in a single decade. And that's the spirit, unfortunately, I think we're losing in many circles in our world today. And so I consider it a tremendous pleasure to be here and actually interface with these guys and to moderate for them tonight, because they have some wonderful stories to tell. And we appreciate you. Big round of applause. Let's make them feel welcome. All right, with that said, we've got a lot of questions on the list, and they're excellent questions. I mean, absolutely dynamic questions, and we want to give them an opportunity to answer those questions. Oh, you got a slideshow first.
Got a video.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, I apologize.
No, that's okay. All right. I want to, can everybody hear me without the mic? Okay.
Yeah.
This next slide, this computer's a little slow, so bear with me. Jack King just passed away a few days ago. I was actually down in Houston at JSC, right across the road from it last week when I heard the news. He was the NASA Chief of Public Information and Public Affairs Officer from 1960 to 75. In that capacity, he was at just about every launch, if not all of them, and did the announcements for the countdown. So I've got a short video. Chase, can you help me pull that up here?
15, 12, 11, 10, 9, ignition sequence start. 5, 4, we have ignition. All engines are on. We have liftoff. We have liftoff at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The tower. All right, T-minus 20, still counting at this time. T-minus 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. We have ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have commit. We have liftoff. Liftoff at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. 5 seconds into the flight, we're looking good. We have cleared the tower. We have Houston, Sarah, Sims Control. 72 degrees, all 5 F1 engines firing, looking good. Give a green light at this time from range safety.
20 seconds, all aspects here are still
You guys hear that okay? Albert, can you boost it a little? Sure.
15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. We have ignition sequence start. The engines are on. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have commit. We have a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Looks good. Clear the tower.
Oh, there's a rumble in the building. It looks good. It looks like a good flight. It's a beautiful takeoff so far. This building is shaky under us. Half the platform is shaky.
I apologize, this is not the video that we tried to pull up originally, but you can hear Jack's voice there, and I just thought this was a good tribute to him and a lead-in because Gemini was a stepping stone to get to the moon in 1969. So, we'll watch this. I don't know, the audio keeps going in and out, I apologize.
Engines on 5, 4, 3, 2. Seconds in time. It's not 2 950. 55 seconds in time. Neil Armstrong's 54 graphics in a real smooth compound. We passed the 50-second mark. Power transfer is complete. We're on internal power with the launch vehicle at this time. 40 seconds away from the Apollo 11 liftoff. You can see the water down the road. 35 seconds in time. We are through to go with Apollo 11. 30 seconds in time. Astronaut report, it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds.
I think this is actually the 11 launch right
20
here.
seconds in time. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Yeah.
12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start.
Yeah.
6, 5,
We'll watch this one.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
So this was seconds. Swing arm back. Go ahead.
We have guidance internally.
All right, so you're going to handle that, and I'll continue. All right, very good. As Dan said, the Gemini program was a stepping stone to Apollo, and for many, it was really the forgotten program. Mercury was exciting because that put us in space the first time. Apollo landed us on the moon, but had it not been for the Gemini program, we probably would not have made it to the moon in a single decade. It proved out many of the sticky problems that they had to overcome before they could ever land on the moon. But I don't want to talk too much about that. That's the job of these fellows here. So we're going to give them an opportunity to answer some questions now that we present to them. And these are some fabulous questions. But before we do that, I'd like to just go down the line, and if you would please just introduce yourself, who you are, and what you did during the Gemini program.
Hi, my name is Jerry Roberts, and I was responsible for the guidance and control system. Went through the design development in St. Louis, not responsible for it, just part of it, but was in the blockhouse for the Gemini launches to orient and get everything set up before the astronaut got in, so that he's initialized for liftoff.
I got to push on. No, just talk. My name is Earl Robb, and I'm a structural mechanical design engineer. So basically, what I did on Gemini is I was involved in leading a group of design engineers to do the structural concept of the capsule and the launch adapter. Those were two big elements of the whole activity as far as the capsule or the satellite went. But the difference between Gemini and Mercury is that all of the equipment and orbital materials that were needed to keep the thing going and fly, those were all stuffed in the very small cabin of the Gemini, of the Mercury. In the Gemini, we got a little smarter and created a thing called an adapter assembly, which sounds like a piece of attachment, but really what it was half of the whole spacecraft, but it was outside the pressurized environment. So that was a real big difference there. Got a lot of other stuff to talk about, but let's go.
All right. I'm Norm Beckel, and I was on in the communications end of it, Gemini, and I was down at the Cape for the Mercury program, and when Gemini started, I came back to St. Louis and headed up a test group for checking out, testing the Gemini spacecraft before they were shipped down to the Cape.
I'm Dean Purdy. I worked on both Mercury and Gemini and a couple other space programs along the way, but I stayed with Mercury until the very end of the program, and a lot of people had been moved over to the Gemini program by the time that I left Mercury. I started in the Gemini program in the electrical power and sequential system, and shortly thereafter I was transferred to the St. Louis operations group, where I was to lead a group to design the test complex for the St. Louis Gemini program, and that test complex had to be capable of testing two Gemini at the same time, not only in the flight room, but also in the 30-foot vacuum chamber in building 103 on adjacent building. So I spent most of my time on the Gemini program and the operations. I'm Ray Tucker. My job with Mercury and Gemini both complete, and I figured that I was one of the guys that had to make it go because I had to put all the cabling and all the electronics in the blockhouse all the way to the spacecraft. And there's 3 of us that had to take and do all the checkout for the whole complete complex. Mercury was very easy. There was only 4 cables that had 50 circuits in them. So we didn't have too much to put there. But then whenever we went over to the Gemini project, we had 5,000 circuits. And those cables were 700 feet long. And they were 2 inches in diameter. That had to go through the cave all the way to the blockhouse, up to the pad. And my job was to make sure that every cable circuit was working perfectly. And so that was a little bit of a job. It was around 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for about 9 months. So you know I was pretty tired. But
All right, thank you very much. The first question here, we may have already answered it, but the first question is, the McDonnell aircraft was chosen as prime contractor for the Gemini program on December 22nd, 1961. Were all of you working concurrently on Mercury and Gemini? And the answer is yes, pretty much yes all around. Norm?
No, we,
You gotta hold the bottom of that. Yeah, there you go. Got it straight.
well, the answer to that, no. In 1961, we were very, very up to our ankles trying to get the Mercury astronauts to launch and down at the Cape. So we were not involved in, not thinking about Gemini at that time. A couple of years later, when the Mercury program came to an end, then we started devoting our time and attention to Gemini. But in 1961, as you know, that was the beginning of manned spaceflight for us. And that was our total energies were involved in that.
All right,
Let's stop.
okay, we're going to try a new mic.
I think we got a bunch of electrical engineers here. We can
Very good. Well, listen, while he's hooking, excuse me, while he's hooking that up, but you see, isn't this the spirit of space flight anyway? Whenever you have problems, you just forge forward, right? You fix the problem. You recognize the problem and you fix it. So we're fixing it.
This microphone worked all weekend at the Waco flying. It's something about you, Dan O'Hara. you create electrical problems. I don't know what it is.
Okay, all right.
I'm going to try it.
Okay, sure.
Let's try this. Turn that other one on. And that one.
Why don't we just let Christine do the talking?
Right, exactly. All right, testing. Hey, this one I think is going to work.
Just don't get Dan away from this.
Okay, no touch, Dan. All right. Oh, that's excellent. Here, let's get our cables out of the way, and then we're in good shape.
And I've got it back up to that one too. So
Very good.
we have 3 systems.
Awesome. Now we're fixed. Okay, now, Norm answered that no. The answer was no in his particular case. Some of the rest of you answered yes, you were working on Mercury and Gemini. Is there another no on the panel? Yes, okay.
Well, now, there was a considerable overlap between the two. Is this working?
Yes.
Okay,
Just hold it
overlap
up here
between
and
the
make
two
sure you-
programs. because all of us were sometimes at the Cape and sometimes in St. Louis, and a lot of times we were back and forth following problems. If a problem, if we ran into it at the Cape during the testing, a lot of times it meant a design change or something to be done to the spacecraft that hadn't been delivered from St. Louis yet. So you go to St. Louis to explain the problem to them so they can get it fixed. They may come down to the Cape then to see if the fix actually worked, because believe it or not, the St. Louis weenies a lot of times shipped us a spacecraft at the Cape that had a lot of parts inside that hadn't been bolted to anything. So that's where the famous Hangar S came in. We actually, as you guys can verify, we actually assembled those things a whole lot. And as the guys in St. Louis will verify, they did everything up there. So it was redundant, but that was the whole idea. You tested it to every conceivable failure. And that was one thing that we didn't entertain. There was no concept at all that we would actually fail. And the thing that we're most proud of is we did the Mercury and the Gemini and the Skylab all coming out of St. Louis and did not lose an astronaut. They all came home safely.
Here, here. All right. Would another one of you have a, yes?
In the question, were all of you working concurrently on Mercury? Hold it up here. There you go. Were all of you working concurrently on Mercury and Gemini? I think that means that each one of us worked on Mercury and Gemini at the same time. Is that right?
Well, that's the way I read it.
Okay. Well, then in my case, the answer is still yes.
Okay.
I was working on Mercury. In fact, I started on Mercury and was working on Mercury when Mr. Mack decided to go for the design of a two-man spacecraft called Gemini. Okay, so I was moved from Mercury to the study group to create the design for the Gemini. So I figured, yeah, the answer is yes. I was working on both at the same time.
Very good.
I think we're going to have to vote on this.
This is going to be a committee. Okay. Gentlemen, we really want to hear what you have to say. The microphone helps. Make sure you hold it about an inch away from your mouth, okay? So, because we really want to hear what you got to say. All right, and talk to the audience.
Yes, sir.
All right, very good.
In my case, as I said before, I stayed with Mercury until the very end of the program, and then moved over to Gemini. Stayed in design for a short period of time, and then went to the operations group. And us weenies in St. Louis that stayed there, as Jerry, we did at one time or another send a spacecraft to the Cape that did not have the very latest configuration, but not very often. And most of the time, the spacecraft was in pretty good shape when we sent it. We tested it very thoroughly. They went down there and they tore it apart and then put it back together again and tested it some more. So it was very thoroughly tested, and guys down at the Cape did a fantastic job of getting it launched.
I can verify that the Mercury and Gemini program, both of them to go. I was working on Mercury all the way to the end, and I had to do the Gemini complex at the same time. So I'll tell you one good one though. We had one big box that had to go in the back of the blockhouse, and it was about 8 foot long and about 47 inches high, and we had to put in a box that was 2 foot wide. And I told him that we wouldn't fit in there. So the guy came down from St. Louis and he says, "Why won't it fit?" And I said, "If you can put that box through
that back in the back of that thing? You know, go ahead and make it that big. Well, he said, well, we'll fix that. So he went back to St. Louis the next morning and come over and he saw the box and he told the guy there, he said, give me a marker. He marked it and he cut it right all the way over the top. He handed it back to the guy and said, now you can make it that way, but the table's in between so he can get that in the blockhouse. And that didn't sit well with that guy. I think we can talk about that one. Didn't sit too well for what he forgot was that when he cut it in half, we had to make connections in between all of those. So it cost about twice as many terminations with electrical wire than was really necessary. So anyway, it worked. Sure, right. Absolutely.
This business of St. Louis testing and down to Cape, there was a big difference between Mercury and Gemini. On Mercury, we were really discovering. Everything was new, test procedures were new. The spacecraft were being sent down to Florida when there were known changes, but they just hadn't been incorporated yet. And we were not under any constraint as to when we could launch. Otherwise, if we wanted to launch on Monday, we could, or we could wait until next week. But when it came to Gemini, now we were talking about a different thing because we were doing a rendezvous in space with two vehicles. And so we had this energy equation of trying to get one vehicle out of an orbit and into another orbit. And you know that's a big transfer of energy. And this was all building that stepping stone towards going to the moon, where time was of the essence. The moon was there, and you could only launch at certain times. So we refined our test procedures on Gemini to where on Mercury, when we got the spacecraft down at Florida, we immediately took it apart and started putting it back together again. We didn't do that on Gemini. When it left St. Louis and Gemini, it was a completed vehicle. There were some changes that had to be made, but most of the testing was thoroughly done in St. Louis because of that, because we were in time constraints as to when we could launch and do these rendezvous maneuvers.
Would anyone else like to comment on that question? Question number one. Okay. This is a little bit lengthy. There's a lead into this, so here we go. One of the goals of Project Gemini was that the spacecraft have full 3-axis control of pitch, roll, and yaw. The OMS, or the Orbital Attitude and Maneuvering System, and transitional hand controllers gave the capsule fighter-like maneuvering performance. According to Wally Schirra, command pilot on Gemini 6, it was like the Blue Angels at 18,000 miles per hour, only it was easier. Gus Grissom was heavily involved in the design, so much so that fellow astronauts nicknamed the capsule the Gusmobile. How closely, by the way, Tom Stafford, I met Tom, and Tom had some unkind words to say about Gus. Tom was about 6'3", I think, and Gus was 5'6", and Tom was constantly getting his head banged with the hatch. He didn't appreciate that too much. They said that they sized the spacecraft for Gus. We're not sure about that. But anyway, the Gusmobile, how closely did you work with Gus on these systems? Who'd like to be the first to take that one?
As a designer, I worked pretty closely with Gus. I need to explain that a little bit to you. Gus was actually assigned by NASA to be the representative and represent all of the astronauts on the Gemini program. So yes, he was very into watching all the all the design work, watching all of the mock-up work, watching all of the activity, and he was, I worked with him fairly closely from a design standpoint, and he was a great guy to work with, and the reason I really liked him is he was straight to the point on everything. There was no halfway stuff with him. He was right to the point all the time. And I'll try to make up a little quick story about Gus.
No time limits tonight, Earl.
And I want to add Mr. McDonnell, Mr. Mack to this picture. Mr. Mack was very, very concentrated and interested in everything that the astronauts were doing. And so he was always there in all the details. When there was a program review, Mr. Mack was there. He was always working with the astronauts, and I got a lot of pictures of him sitting on a bench, with a notebook on his knee, making notes as he talked to the astronauts. And he was very popular with all the astronauts, and particularly Gus Grissom. And I'll add to this story just a little bit now. When Gus would come in, if he was interested in looking at something that we were doing, Mr. Mack would almost always be with him. And this one time that I'm thinking of as Mr. Mack wasn't with him, and so Gus and I were looking over some ideas that we had, and we made a mock-up for him to aid in EVA. It was an early period of us working out all of the extravehicular activity things that had to happen. So Gus was a little disappointed in the approach that I was showing him, and we were debating about it, and Gus said to me, he said, Earl, he said, you need to get in a spacesuit and understand what it's all about. And I said, well, I've been working with all of the crew systems people and to understand that, but yes, I'll do that, Gus. And so I went on, and for the rest of the day we were doing activities, and right after lunch I got a phone call from Mr. Mack's secretary, and she said, Mr. Mack wants you to go down there and get in the pressure suit. So what I'm pretty sure happened is that Gus told Mr. Mack that what he had done, and Mr. Mack jumped right on it just like that before I could ever get to doing the job.
You just brought back something, some memory long ago. Do you remember the flap when Gus wanted rudder pedals?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a long story. Yeah. Okay.
That's the one he didn't win on.
He didn't win.
He didn't win on that one. But he won on most of them.
Yeah, but that was quite a fight.
So I have to know, did they have a spacesuit your size?
Yeah.
And you wore one?
Just a little long.
A little bit long. All right. Would anyone else like to comment on that? Who else had personal experience with Gus? No? Okay.
Well, I was in meetings with him, of course, but I didn't work closely with him like some of the guys.
You got you. All right.
During the Gemini program, I worked with in the Mercury program, I worked with all the astronauts, and I lived the first street as you got out of the gate next to the ocean, Atlantic Ocean. Every other night or so, a couple of astronauts would come down and park their car across the street from me and go down, they come run all the way down to Cocoa Beach, and and back. It's 5 miles down and 5 miles back. I thought I was pretty up to date on running. So I saw them, and they said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I live here." So they said, "Well, come on down to the beach and run with us." I thought, well, I'll try it. So I went down there with them, and we took off down the beach, and it wasn't about 10 minutes, and they was about 100 yards ahead of me or more. Well, it's 5 miles down there and 5 miles back. I only went about halfway down there and then turned and come back, and they like to beat me back, and they went all the 5 miles they played. And this happened about average of about twice a week. And every one of the 7 astronauts I've done in my home have either eaten meal or coffee or tea, whatever we had. And I was pretty well started with it. I think I had a good one. And I do go to church with Gus Grissom's brother every Sunday. Now, if you ever want to go to church out of Ocala Christian Church, come out some Sunday morning. We'll embarrass you. See you. You want something? No?
There was a funny story told about Lowell Grissom. Whenever they raised Liberty Bell, they of course brought it back to St. Louis. It went on a world tour for a while. And Greg Marinack was the director of the James S. McDonnell Planetarium at the time. And it was after hours, and he was just kind of going through the exhibits, seeing if anyone else was there or not. And he turned around, and Lowell was, if any of you have seen Lowell, he looks a lot like Gus. And so Greg turns around, kind of catches a glimpse of Lowell in the corner of his eye, and he said, "I thought I had seen a ghost." And it like to scared him to death. All right. Grissom, along with John Young, flew the first manned mission with GT-3 on March 23rd, 1965. Grissom named the craft Molly Brown, after the Broadway musical The Unsinkable Molly Brown. Wishing to not have another experience as he had with the Mercury Liberty Bell 7 when the capsule sank after splashdown, NASA management did not favor this name, so Grissom offered, how about the Titanic? Molly Brown was allowed, but this marked the last time that the astronauts were able to name their spacecraft. Can you tell us a bit more about the Molly Brown and also John Young's contraband corned beef sandwich? Deke Slayton later admitted in his autobiography that he had given John permission. Any of you would like to comment on that? I think the statute of limitations is out on this one. Okay.
GT-3 was another mission, another Gemini mission that was a first. No spacecraft up to that point, Russian or U.S., had demonstrated the ability to change orbit. And that was the primary mission for GT-3. And it did so very, very well. But the story that I heard with regard to the corned beef sandwich was that Wally Schirra sneaked the sandwich into John Young, and of course they had the sandwich for lunch or whatever during the flight, and that angered the doctors, who said that it probably did something to the blood work that they were taking during the mission. But anyway, they made a big fuss over it, and Wally Schirra said he didn't know why they were fussing about it. He said that sandwich was qualified before we sent it up. Said we dropped it off the top of a step ladder, and that was the sandwich that held best together of those that we tested. So.
Emergency egress on the Mercury had been an escape tower equipped with a solid fuel rocket. On Gemini, however, 2 ejection seats were utilized. Jim Chamberlain was a proponent of this egress system, and after reviewing films of Atlas and Titan II ICBM failures, reasoned that the Titan II with its hypergolic fuel would produce a much smaller fireball in the case of an explosion on liftoff. However, Maxime Faget, who designed the Mercury LES, was concerned that the astronauts could experience injury during an ejection, and also that they would only have about 40 seconds from liftoff to utilize them, as the craft would be approaching Mach 1, and ejection would no longer be possible. Were any of you involved in the design and testing of this new egress system?
I wasn't involved in the design and the initial testing, but as part of the launch preparation in the Bachhaus, this system was so marginal that they were afraid that the ejection rocket would take him straight out, the parachute would open horizontally while it was going out, and then it would come down. Now, the idea was to get it outside the fireball, but they were afraid that it was so close that any wind could blow him back into the fireball. Well, they had a little bit of control of the trajectory once the rocket with the astronaut in his seat went out of the spacecraft, very slight control, but during the countdown we used to change that trajectory there within those limits depending on the way the wind was blowing. And that's how close it was. That system, my own self says if we ever had to use it, it would not have worked. We would have lost an astronaut.
Someone else?
Nobody liked the system, including the astronaut.
Or the guy who was proponent.
That was what I was going to say. That is the way I felt.
Yes.
I wasn't involved in the design of the ejection seat system, but indirectly I was involved in it. I worked with the Weber group, who were the designers of that and builders of it, and I kind of worked with their representatives there on the design of the structure to support that ejection seat system. Very interesting. But I just want to make this simple statement. I was really scared of it. I didn't like the system. And not that it wouldn't work, but it didn't seem to be proper for the activity we had. I was really scared. And it came out okay because nothing happened. But I didn't like it.
Well, you know, everyone so objected to it that they immediately went for the Apollo vehicle. They went right back to the escape rocket system that we used on the Mercury. And by the way, the new NASA Orion spacecraft there is using the same escape system that we designed on the Mercury. So it works.
Can't argue with success, can you?
Right.
No, you can't. Sometimes, you know, I tell a lot of people that the best rule of thumb is the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. The simpler it is, the less chance you have of it breaking. The simpler it is, the less chance for a mistake. All right. Anyone else like to comment on that? Was it Gemini 6 that had the board on the pad? Yes, it was Gemini 6. And of course, Wally had his hand on the abort handle. And had he fired the ejection seat, it would have destroyed the spacecraft, and they wouldn't have been able to use it. But as it turned out, they used it in a rendezvous maneuver, which was really fantastic in 6 and 7, where they put two spacecraft up at the same time in rendezvous. Wally was always admired for his cool head and courage for not pulling that ejection handle whenever the rocket aborted on the pad. Having heard what these guys just got through saying, I'm not so much sure it was courage as it was caution. So, you know, he was kind of doomed either way. So anyway, all right. How difficult. Now this, you know, we were talking about that a while ago. We were looking at the Gemini onboard camera back here, and we were talking about miniaturization and the film cassettes and all that stuff. You know, they flew a 2-week Gemini mission, 2 weeks, in a vehicle with the space allotted to you about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, okay? 2 weeks. So you really have to like the guy you're flying with, right? But how in the world did they cram all that stuff inside that spacecraft? How difficult was it to squeeze 2 astronauts, fuel, oxygen, and all of the other systems into a vehicle that was just over 18 feet long, 10 feet wide, with a weight limitation of just over 8,000 pounds?
Did it in Earl's adapter.
Earl did.
There you go.
Well, yeah. The Gemini was built in really 2 pieces. If you think of it as a spacecraft, you had the module, and then you had the adapter assembly. And most of the equipment, or almost all of the equipment that had to be there for the flight, fuel tanks, environmental system kind of stuff, batteries, everything, all of that ended up in the adapter section. And that was a pretty large section. So that is the way that we were able to open up the area where the pilots were living in. They no longer did they have to put their feet around a fuel tank or a battery or something. It went into the adapter. I hope that explains it.
Well, there was one caveat on that. The adapter was a non-pressurized area, and so all of the systems we put back there had to be tested under the vacuum conditions, and a lot of redesign had to be done before they could be mounted there. But any new system we came up with and needed a place to mount it, we said, Earl, put it in the adapter, no problem.
So you basically what you did was build a trunk for the Gemini, right? Everything went in the trunk, right?
Good description.
All right. Someone else.
The equipment that was in the equipment bays on the reentry vehicle, the module itself, were those things that were required for reentry, the oxygen and electrical power and so on that were required for reentry and landing. The other things were put in the adapter, but within the reentry vehicle there were 7 batteries. I think there were four batteries, 4 main batteries, and 3 squib batteries, and then the larger batteries that were utilized for the missions were in the adapter. The fuel cells were in the adapter. The cryogenics that were used for the fuel cells, the oxygen and hydrogen were back there. ECS system portions of were back there. But those things that were required for module or reentry module operation were included in the equipment bays on the reentry vehicle.
Someone else like to add to that? There's a story, I'm not sure if, well, I'm going to assume it's true because astronauts don't lie, right? Neither do engineers, ever. Right? Okay. On Gemini, I've forgotten the number now, but anyway, it was the long duration flight with Frank Borman and Jim Lovell. They spent 2 weeks aboard Gemini. Which one was that? Help me out. 7, thank you. Spent a long time in there. And, you know, your bodily functions don't change when you're in space. And so here they are in this space like the front end of a Volkswagen Bug, and they're having to do their duty in there, if you know what I mean, you know, taking care of all the biological functions. And Frank Borman tells this story. He said after they landed, they thought they had done a really, really nice job of policing the spacecraft and everything, keeping it cleaned up. He said after they landed, they both wanted to go take a shower really, really bad. So they took a shower, and then whenever they went back to the Gemini spacecraft, he said that he opened the hatch and the stench nearly knocked him down. So, you know, it's just one of those things, right? If you're going to fly in space, you got to be tough, right? Okay. All right. Originally, Gemini... Oh, sorry, Dean.
Another little story that goes with that. Lovell likes to tell the story after they've been in space for about 9 days, and he said Frank looked over at him and he said, "Jim," he said, "I've just got to go." And Jim supposedly said, "Frank, only 5 more days. Can't you wait a little longer?" Sure, of course.
I wish our astronaut's nurse were here.
Rose Church.
Rose Church. She could probably explain this all to them. I remember her commenting on Jim Lowe once, and she says, "Well, I put his urine bag on him for him," and she would I think be. I wish we had her.
Earl.
Yeah. Excuse me?
Picture of, I got a slide, there's Rose on the left.
Yes,
Oh,
right
there
here.
you go, that's her on the left, yeah.
Precious lady. I consider it a tremendous privilege to have met her. Very special. I mean, she had to be pretty special to work around these guys, and you know that had to be very humbling for Jim Lovell. You know, I put your urine bag on you, buddy. All right. This is a very interesting question, extremely interesting. Me being a mechanical engineer, I really appreciate the answer to this. Were the construction methods used on the Gemini spacecraft the same as building a regular aircraft?
Almost. We basically used stringers, ribs, and skin, and it was pretty close to regular aircraft, except we did have to use different materials, titanium, magnesium, and stuff like that, because of the heat situation. But it's pretty close to the same thing. One basic difference, though, is on a jet airplane, the cockpit, you know, was filled up with skin, stringers, and so forth. But we used rivets and bolts and things to put things together. We tried not to do that on Gemini. The pressurized compartment for the astronauts was fusion welded, very thin skin titanium. So we tried to not have any bolt holes or things like that. That was a difference.
During the shuttle program, you know, the idea was to use as many off-the-shelf things as possible to make the shuttle as economically feasible as possible. So they did a lot of things. Matter of fact, the launch and entry helmet that they used, some of you probably know this already, up until 1986 when we lost Challenger, was a fighter pilot helmet. It was the HDU 20P, I believe, and we actually have one of those in the museum. So they tried to use off-the-shelf stuff as much as possible, just like a government program too, because the fighter pilots hated them. They absolutely hated them. too heavy, not enough visibility, and a whole lot of them went over the side. They actually used them some in Vietnam on the F-8 Crusader, and a lot of them went over the side. The pilots just threw them away. They didn't like them. But my question to you is this: did you try to use as much off-the-shelf stuff as you could, or were you into high technology and dreaming things up as you went along?
The Mercury was off the shelf. We had to ruggedize or make a little smaller some of the equipment, but basically there wasn't any time to invent anything. But now speaking for the guidance system, it was all new for Gemini. We had the first computer that ever flew in space and was ever small enough to be. But our computer was the equivalent of about a square foot, a little more, and that didn't include the power supply. And we had all of the 4K memory there, and it was RAM, and it was non-destructive readout on it. And yet that sucker did a rendezvous time after time with no problems whatsoever. So it did do its job. There was some real weird software programming that had to be done. And there was one other thing. There was absolutely, and I don't know about Norm's stuff, but in the guidance control system, there was no redundancy, no backup circuits at all. And this was to save space and weight, but also everything in the guidance system except rendezvous you could not do, or you could do manually. You could either rendezvous if you went, and they did this. If you went up and tried a rendezvous and it didn't work, you just didn't do it. But re-entry, if the computer was not working, or re-entry, you could do it manually, and they did, or 2 or 3 times. So, but no, the systems, all the guidance system was new. The control system, a good part of it there, but yeah, we had time on Gemini to do that.
Awesome.
Fuel
Yes,
cells.
Norm?
We didn't have fuel cells.
On Mercury, you didn't?
No. Mercury was batteries. Gemini had the fuel cells. First time that they ever had them small enough to fly in space. So there were a lot of firsts on the Gemini program, which had things that had to be proven there before the Apollo could go to the moon. The electronics boxes on Mercury were all developed specifically for Mercury because of form factor. It had to, people like Earl had to fit them into strange places. A conical vehicle like that, nothing was perfectly square or rectangle. Things had curves in them. The difference with Gemini was that we went all solid state on Gemini. On Mercury we did use some vacuum tubes, especially in the fire output amplifier stages would be vacuum.
You actually still had some vacuum tubes on Gemini?
No.
No.
No, not on Gemini. We did on Mercury.
On Mercury. Okay.
The exception is we had Chlysotrons. We used either Chlyssotron or magnetron for our radar beacons. But other than that, resolved solid state.
All right, thank you so much. What engineering issue? Since we're talking about engineering and we're talking about cramming stuff in small spaces and making things work, what was the toughest one? What engineering issue or parts design was the most difficult to overcome? All of them, right?
I don't know of any easy one.
You want to say that?
Well, I think every system had its unique problems. I mean, Norm's communication stuff had different problems than we did in guidance control, and the electrical power people had different problems shoving their stuff in. But every
every system had a unique problem. It just hadn't, but you know, the common thing was fitting it into a small area. And I don't know of any of them that was just easy in the walking, and then you go home at 5 o'clock thing. It didn't happen.
Did you ever feel like you hit a brick wall?
Oh yeah.
I mean, you felt like you had run up against something that you could every day.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That's what I think it was Chris Kraft that was credited for saying that. He said, "Yeah," he said, "we solved 100 unsolvable problems every day." And so that's true. All right, that's what makes this all remarkable.
You know, Earl, let me say something here. I hate to be talking so much, but a guy told me one time, and I've remembered it ever since, and I love it. He said, in the early space program, our biggest asset was not knowing that it couldn't be done. And so we did it. And looking back, that's exactly right. I don't know of one problem that wasn't resolved in one way or the other, but I don't know of one problem that we didn't think was a brick wall when it came up.
Amazing. Amazing. This is a good one. This is a real good one, actually. And I had a young man, I do programs with kids a lot, and I had a young man ask me the other day, and I thought it was a wonderfully astute question. And we look at it a little bit differently now, but at the time it was a very important question. He asked me this, he said, "Why did the Russians beat us into space?" And you know, I had to think about that for a minute. There's a lot of political, socio-political reasons for that. There was technological reasons for that. But I think really the answer that I came up with is we just didn't want it bad enough. Really, bottom line, we just didn't want to do it bad enough. We really didn't consider the Russians as a threat. But anyway, that's my opinion. Did the space race with the Soviet Union extend to any part of the design work involved with Project Gemini or Mercury? Was there a sense of urgency present within either program to beat the Soviet design team?
Yes, definitely.
Gosh, yes.
I didn't make this question up.
Oh, absolutely.
Earl, I got the same reaction on
Yeah, that's the 18-hour day, 7-day week syndrome was because of that. And you talk about the Russians getting there before we did. And one of the things was that they already had built a launch vehicle, a rocket that could lift a lot more weight than ours could. You know, when Kennedy made that statement about going to the moon, we didn't have a launch vehicle, a rocket there anywhere near developed that could lift 8,000 pounds, for instance. It just didn't happen, and could get us the orbital velocity necessary to get out of the Earth's gravitational pull. That had to be developed. It was being developed, but those of us at the Cape can verify several times a month, and it seemed almost weekly, and sometimes a time or two a week. They would lift off an Atlas or a Titan or a Minuteman or some of those, and it blows up. This was a development program we were in. Well, the Russians, they put everything into one and went as big as they could, and they didn't have to miniaturize equipment or anything else. They had a relatively large system to work with, and they didn't have those problems. Plus, again, let me speak my opinion, they were not trying to protect the astronauts. I still think the Russians lost several astronauts in trying before they finally made the launch. Now that's just I can't prove that. That's just my opinion.
Others hold that opinion. Yes, Dean.
When Mercury was announced in 1958, the Mercury program, I think probably the only operational missile that we had that was capable of lifting the Mercury or launching the Mercury was the Redstone. and could not get it into orbit. That was just for a suborbital flight, and that had about a 78,000 pound thrust. The Atlas, which was under development shortly thereafter, or at that time really, had about a 300,000 pound thrust, and that was the only one that could get the Mercury into orbit. And the astronauts saw a lot of those things blow up while they were at the Cape, and said that's a good way to end your career quickly. When the Titan came along, they had about 430,000 pound thrust, and that was great for Gemini. They could lift the 8,000 pound vehicle very nicely. But then you think about Apollo and the tremendous advance in technology and our boosters, from 430,000 pounds to 7.5 million pounds for the Apollo on the next program. That was a tremendous increase in technology, and that's what enabled us to get to the moon first. Russia did not have, at the time that Kennedy made the challenge after Shepard's flight, Russia did not have a launch vehicle that was capable of getting us beyond Earth's gravitational pull with any heavy vehicle, with any heavy launch payload. So both countries had to develop something, and we were very, very fortunate to just do a much better job than they did.
I'm going to throw in here something unplanned. I don't know about you, but I could sit and listen to these guys all night. I really could. And I hope this is being recorded, and I think that it is. It needs to be saved for posterity. Do we need to have a little break right now?
Let me tell my story.
Sure. Okay, we got one other story here. Would that be okay, Dan? Just have about a 5-10 minute break. We would really love for you to come back. There's a couple more questions here. I think we planned on going till about 9. It's open-ended. But I do realize you have been sitting for a while and you may need to take a break. Yes, sir. I don't know. When do they? You do get to ask a question. Excuse me.
No, I said that will be coming up, and I didn't know you're up to about what? 10 questions?
Actually, the next one is question 10.
Okay.
So, and there's only 212 questions on this page. So we're getting along pretty good.
I figure we get to about 150.
Yeah. Okay. So here, Jerry wants to throw something in here, and I'm certain it's going to be worth waiting for. Then let's take about a 5-minute break. Let you get your stretch your legs, get something to drink or something, or eat, and then we'll go at it again.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Okay, at the Cape, we had launch pads about every half mile, and the launch pad 12, where we had the Atlas launches there, was about a mile from. We were on 14, and 12 is where they were developing the Atlas and launching those, and they were just blowing up regularly. But anyway, we had the Atlas mounted and Glenn's spacecraft on top, and we're testing one morning about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and somebody came in and said they are preparing to launch an Atlas on 12. So Glenn's Atlas was there, the spacecraft's on top. He and Carpenter were with us, and he said, let's go watch it. So we go outside. This is when they launched on 12, came up about 100 feet, and then blew up like that. I mean, it's an enormous explosion. And Carpenter looked over at Glenn, he said, you're next, John.
All right, let's take a break. Short break. Stretch your legs, get something to drink, grab a cookie, some popcorn, potato chips.
Restrooms are right around the
Then
corner.
come back and we will go at this again. If I get this right, Alan has just recently retired from Boeing. Yes, he looks way too young, doesn't he? I hate it too. He just retired from Boeing. This is Ken Mattingly's cousin. Okay, and they say, who in the world is Ken Mattingly? Can you tell them who Ken Mattingly is?
Well, he also goes by TK Mattingly, but he was an astronaut on Apollo 16 and 2 space shuttle missions. And not only that, but he was supposed to be on 13, but he was exposed to sickness, so he just helped on the ground to get him back. So, yeah.
All right. Bill, thanks, Ken. Or Ken. Yeah, thanks, Ken. Thanks, Alan. All right. I know you're all chomping at the bit. You want to ask some questions. I am going to ask one more off of the panel protocol here. Which one will it be? I kind of like this one because this is kind of an unknown portion of the manned space program. How many of you are familiar with the abbreviation or the acronym MOL? M-O-L. Some of you are. Yeah. The Manned Orbiting Laboratory. It was to be an offshoot of the Gemini program under the auspices of the Air Force. So the question is this: were any of you involved with the Air Force Manned Orbital Laboratory program or Blue Gemini?
Yeah, 4 years. I don't get this.
Dean's been sitting over here all patient, quiet.
Oh, really?
Yes. I'm going to give it to Dean first. You just hold that, Jerry.
No, I'll bet.
Just hold
Yes,
that.
the Manned Orbiting Laboratory was a really a top secret program at that time, and it was a spy in the sky, if you will. Think of the Hubble Space Telescope pointing down at Earth rather than out into space. And it had a tremendous resolution. Jerry, do you remember the resolution? Something like 2 or 3 inches resolution, something like that, from 170, 80 miles up. And it was fantastic. Unfortunately, the program was canceled by Congress. Russia was doing exactly the same thing at exactly the same time. And they didn't cancel their program. It actually had 3 flights, one of which they said was successful. Now, I don't know what they meant by successful, but you think about a camera at that distance orbiting the Earth and being able to, we were orbiting at what, 18,000 miles an hour, 17,000 miles an hour, and being able to focus in on a subject, whatever that subject is, and be able to track that long enough to get a very, very sharp picture. And that's what the mole was supposed to do. Let's see, I was in Gemini operations through Gemini 7. That would have been right before. Well, I was on 7, so right before Armstrong's flight, which was 8. I didn't have anything to do with Armstrong's flight, but it aborted, didn't have anything to do with that one at all. But anyway, I left spacecraft operations, St. Louis spacecraft operations after 7, and went over to the MOL program, and my job there was to review the electrical systems design for the heat shield qualification test. And that was where they cut a hole in the heat shield of the Gemini for a hatch, and the astronauts would leave the Gemini and go back into the laboratory through that hatch. And then after a month or 2, however long they would be up there, they would come back into the Gemini and close the hatch and re-enter in the same way as the Gemini always did. So they had to prove that that heat shield with the hole in it, with the hatch in it, was good, was operational, and they did that test, and it worked out very, very well. Shortly, let's see. We did a lot of interfacing with the Air Force out in California at San Jose. Julie, were you involved in that interfacing with the San Jose group? Perhaps you want to speak more about it.
Did it actually get past anywhere past just probability studies or boilerplate or mock-up?
Oh, yeah. Well, they actually launched the vehicle, the Gemini vehicle. That was the single, in fact, that vehicle was one that NASA had launched there, unmanned, recovered,
right.
and we cut the hole in the heat shield, and they launched it again, and they did prove that the heat shield, even with the door in it, would still protect the vehicle when it came back, and that vehicle turned out to be the only Gemini spacecraft that was ever launched twice. It's in the Air Force Museum at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida now. If any of you are down that way, you can see it sometime. But no, my input to it was still just guidance and control, and basically we were adapting the same guidance system from Mercury for the MOL, almost identical. It was to have a larger memory and a little bit more capability, but that was about it.
All right. Thank you very much. Now's your chance.
Earl,
Yes.
let me chime in just for a second.
Sure, of course.
I want to
By all means.
go back to an earlier question that was just before our break. And it was talking about how many hours were spent each week and day in and day out and day in and day out on the Gemini project. And a lot of these men were away from home a lot. And I tell you what, they couldn't have done it without a bunch of good wives to support them. So I just want to recognize that.
You know, that's absolutely correct. I apologize. Would you ladies stand, please?
Yes.
Would you ladies stand?
Thank you.
Give them a big hand. Judy Tucker. Fluff Rob. I don't even know what your real name is.
Donna.
Donna. I do. Carol Purdy. You're going to have to help me.
Sandy Roberts.
Sandy. And this gentleman is no wife. This is Roy Ryder, by the way. He's one of the Mac's old team. Did I get the last name right?
Yes.
Ryder. Very good. Because I got corrected a while ago. It's not Ritter, it's Ryder. And Roy, what did you do on the Mercury, or in the with McDonnell others?
Well, that's up to Jackie. In 1959, September, I was sent down there with two other people, and we established the McDonnell aircraft office at Canaveral Operations. And I was there for the full 8.5 years into the Apollo program. And so my job was assistant to the base manager, who initially was John Yardley, and then it was Ray Hill, who, by the way, just passed away about 2 weeks ago. So I had a good perspective of the overall operation, and because of that, I got something in my hand here that I thought should be mentioned, and that is that the Gemini program was the most significant program in space for one reason. I'd like to read it. It said, had the fire not happened, I'm convinced in my own mind we would never have gotten to the moon in the 60s. Because we had the fire, because we had the hiatus, because we had the time, we then were able to plow in the lessons learned from Gemini, particularly into the redesign of the spacecraft. I'm convinced that that made Apollo successful. And that was put out by Chris Kraft, the Apollo program flight director. And that really puts everything in place, really, that Gemini made it possible, because after the fire, they came back and there are 8 specific items that we did on the Gemini program that were SOP, and they put that into the Apollo spacecraft. And of course, as everybody says and everybody knows, we started out, nobody had been there before. We didn't lose anybody, nobody got hurt. And when they incorporated the McDonnell ideas of way of doing things in through the Apollo spacecraft, it worked fine and everything went fine. One basic point I wanted to mention, though, that was very inherent to everybody, and that is what we did on Gemini was the same thing, same procedures, the same way of doing things as we had on all of our high-performance aircraft. After all, when you're at 66,000 feet, you might as well be in space as far as the environment is concerned. So I just thought it was significant to point out that of all the things that happened and so forth, it was still the Gemini that made it possible for the West Coast made Apollo. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. What a beautiful recap to everything that's been said tonight. All right, questions. We're going to try to do this in an orderly fashion. If you have a question that you would like to pose, how do you want to do this? You want to come up to the mic, or you just want to speak from where you're at? If stand, no, go ahead and stand. Try to speak loudly so everyone can hear your question, and then we will let the panelists respond. Okay, go ahead.
I guess this is more for Earl, because you were talking about you were part of the concept design team for Gemini, and I was wondering about extravehicular activity. At what point when you guys were conceiving and designing the capsule, did you start considering the fact that you were going to have to open up the door in flight, and people were going to go out and walk, do spacewalks? Was that did you guys consider that early on, from day one, or how did you work that into the overall plan?
Well,
Did you get all that, Earl?
I,
Yeah, here you go.
I'm,
No.
hard of hearing, but I think I got it.
Here's the question. Did you consider EVA getting out of the Gemini spacecraft early on in the program, or was that an also ran?
Well, the answer is it's both. Let me explain. We're talking Gemini. We knew that we had to work out all the things that have to happen to make EVA work. We knew that right at the time we started designing. And so that was in our minds all the time. But when we started designing the aircraft and so forth, spacecraft, excuse me, and actually putting it in production, we didn't put much of our time or activity in EVA things for the first few flights. So it was kind of a situation where we had the basic aircraft design going, and the missions for EVA came, first one is number 4. So as we prepared ourselves for number 4, we really got serious and started working on the designs of whatever it was we wanted to do to achieve EVA. That make any sense to you? So we kind of built it up as we went along, and we started that activity about number 4.
Any of the other panelists like to make a comment? No?
Well, I think.
Look, hold on.
I think as we went along in the program, I think everybody found out that the EVA was not as simple as it might sound. And Earl, I think, was involved later on in doing a lot of the fixes that made the EVA successful. Did you not on
yeah, we did have to, we did make a lot of parts, and we did test them and so forth, and we worked with the astronauts, and then as that went on all the time, we found that we had to change things, so it was a kind of a growing process.
All right, I hope a fight doesn't break out here, but we're going to have to kind of take it. We'll sweep it across the room here. Yes.
This little white cap on top, was that an ablative shield for the capsule? On top of the spacecraft when they launched, it was always like a white layer. Was that an ablative shield?
I think he's talking about you're talking about here?
Yes, exactly, yeah.
In the launch configuration, whenever it was setting on the pad, in all the pictures you see a little white beanie cap. Yeah, see it here? A little white beanie cap on top of the vehicle. What was that for? Somebody's dinner plate.
I think that's where they, I'm not sure if that's where that's set on top of our antennas. It wasn't actually part of the antenna, but I'm not sure if that was just for protection.
It was, yeah.
Can I tell you what it was?
Yeah.
I know what it was. It was a boost protective cover. It was BPC. It covered the rendezvous acquisition radar in order to prevent bird strikes, yada, yada, yada. But that's exactly what it was. It was fiberglass, and I'm the kid on the block, but I know a few things, okay? Because I had the same dumb question. You don't know how long I spent researching that. Okay, just a second. Yes, Dale. Would they talk about Velcro engineering? I heard this being discussed a while ago, and I'm not sure all of you need to hear this discussion.
Well, I can tie that Velcro subject into the EVA things a little bit. One of the activities or needs for doing EVA is to have a path, from the cockpit back to the back of the adapter to get on the manned maneuvering unit, or to go somewhere else around the vehicle to get to experiments and pull those out. We did a lot of playing around, I guess is the best term, on what is the best way that the astronauts could to go from one place to the other without falling off into space. I guess I'll have to say I got in touch with, this was back when Velcro was rather new. I found out who the inventor of Velcro was and talked to him on the phone, and he came and brought to St. Louis a big roll of Velcro. And so what we did is we made patches of Velcro and glued them onto the outside of the vehicle, mostly on the adapter section. And if you see, there's a lot of times if you look at that white section, you'll see a whole bunch of black things around there. That's the Velcro patches. And then to make that work, the astronaut, we had to put the other side of Velcro on the hands, the gloves of the spacesuit. So the astronauts tried that out and several times, and didn't like it because it grabbed them too tight. It was too much effort to pull off of one to get to the other one. So we finally left out that criteria. That's part of Velcro's story. Now, yeah. We did think about it, but we never really got into it. That's right.
All right, I got to slip one in. I've been meaning to ask you guys this forever. Why was it decided to land? I think I know the answer to this, but I want to hear the truth. Why was it decided to land the Gemini spacecraft vertically instead of on its bottom like Mercury? In other words,
Land, you mean land in the ocean
well,
vertically?
no. I mean, I understand the ocean landing, but whenever Gemini re-entered Earth's atmosphere, when Mercury came down, it landed on its bottom. Gemini had a special lanyard or shroud inside the spacecraft that flipped it over and it went vertical and it landed so the pilots were sitting up. Why was that?
Right now we didn't use the bag on the landing there. You know, on Mercury we had a drop heat shield and that cushioned the landing. But I think it was just part of the testing that they went to the horizontal type.
Well, you know, it's coming down with a chute on top, and it hits the water. And when it came down and hit the water, it was not touching really vertically. It was tilted a bit.
Right.
And then the CG of the vehicle was such that it would lay down horizontally, and the astronauts were sitting in the chair just like you and I, and the ocean is here. You know?
Okay, well,
that's the best I can describe.
I might chime in. This, I had pulled from this article that was written in Air and Space in 1998 called Flying the Gusmobile, and they talk about the lift vector, that they could actually change their touchdown point by 30 miles or so either way.
They actually, the center of gravity on Gemini, on Mercury, now correct me if I'm wrong, on Mercury it was pretty much central to the spacecraft. On Gemini it was offset. And the reason it was offset, it allowed the vehicle to produce some lift. And because it had some lift, they were actually able to control it a little bit and control their splashdown location. What? No, don't be sorry.
We were just trying to figure it out.
Just trying to figure it out? I think it was left over from the Regalo program and they didn't know what to do with it, so they just landed it that way.
I think it just came down at a slight angle and then rolled over because the CG was up forward, and that left them in the vertical, in their vertical position.
Understood. Okay.
I wanted to ask Earl why all those silly cables sticking out there.
Yeah, really. What is this, Earl? What is all this nastiness sticking out here?
That I know what it is. The way we separated the Gemini from the booster was through a pyrotechnic cutting device. Called flexible linear shape charge, and basically it's two rows of material that when ignited it cuts the metal. Okay, so part of that, I don't know which part, but part of that is the center section between those two cutters left this strip of metal. Okay, that's part of it. The other part of the stuff is some electrical lines that were going to the thing that cut that put the what's it called, Dean?
Guillotine.
Huh? No, not a guillotine.
The initiator?
Squib. The squib that puts the juice to the cutters. The wires that went to the when that got all cut, those wires were still hanging out. That's what it is.
I thought that was stuff some of the St. Louis guys would take care of before they sent it down.
Well, you electrical guys didn't tie them down.
All right, enough. Can't we just get along? How did we make it to the moon in one decade? Okay. All right, other questions from the floor? Yes, sir.
Yes. The Greater St. Louis Air and Space Museum has two representatives of the four designs that were considered for the spacesuit for the Gemini program. We have one of the B.F. Goodrich and one of the Dave Clark suits. In researching those, I've learned that NASA sent 3 astronauts, Grissom, John Young, and Seed, to evaluate the suit in the hardware and in the mock-ups. I've read some comments from them, but I'm wondering, did any of you get involved in the suit selection?
All right, did you hear the question? Okay, none of you were involved in that? No. Okay. Well, you can't scratch that one off your want list. All right, any other questions from the floor? Yes, sir, in the back.
So, at some point, McDonnell submitted a lunar proposal to NASA using Gemini. Were any of you involved with that at all?
Did you hear the question?
Are you talking about blue Gemini?
No. There was a proposal that McDonnell to go to the moon. Gemini.
Big Gemini, right?
Oh,
Big Gemini.
I know what he's talking about. No, I wasn't involved.
All right, none of you were involved in that? Yes, okay. Yes, Roy.
That was going on. There was a part of NASA that was going to set the Gemini on a circumlunar flight, but politics got involved and said that if we do that, they're going to take money away from the main program, so let's scrap the idea.
Wow, Congress again. Well, maybe not Congress, but...
See, nothing's changed in 50 years.
No, nothing has changed. Did you hear the answer to that? Yeah, that's phenomenal. All right, other questions from the floor? Yes, sir.
Is there anything remaining in orbit from any of the Gemini flights, or were they all low enough orbit that anything is re-entered?
It's re-entered long ago.
Then I had another question real quick, because I've always been curious about this. You had tremendous success with Mercury and tremendous success with Gemini. So I've always wondered why McDonnell Aircraft didn't wind up with the Apollo program, with the re-entry vehicle. Because you had all these incredible experts by this time. You'd solved all these problems for all these years. Do you have any thoughts on, obviously they must have been trying to get that program, I'm assuming.
They didn't want it when they get the program. They always are anticipation that once we won Mercury, it was going to be a follow-through with that. I don't know. Politics is all I can say. Our proposal just was not accepted, and I think that had Roy was saying, had we won the program, had we designed the Apollo vehicle, my opinion again, there would not have been a fire, and Gus Grissom might have been talking to you today, right here. And that's
We certainly proved that with the first two programs. Everybody came back safe. So.
no, it was just politics. I don't know of any other reason.
Yes.
I heard the reason why they didn't fund the SSD program. They thought they would transfer more to Apollo. That's what I heard. It's because of their experience with the X-15.
He mentioned that it had something to do with the X-15 program, that the technologies that they had developed through the X-15 program, that is Rockwell, or North American at that time, would transfer better to Apollo. And I heard just a little bit different twist to that. Originally, North American had been considered an odds-on favorite even for the Mercury and Gemini thing, but the government was already putting money into the X-15 program, and so they wanted to spread the wealth a little bit. Now, that's what I heard. That's an opinion, and so that's all I know. And then whenever Mercury and Gemini were complete, then the nod went to North American. Now, that's what but again, that's conjecture. We may never know. Yes?
Earl, I just wanted to chime in too that, there were several other corporations and firms in the state of Missouri that contributed to the space program. Most notably, the Rocketdyne plant in Neosho produced all the boosters up through Gemini and some of the early Apollo missions. And in Mexico, Missouri was the refractories that's closed. I think they might have reopened that in the last year or two. They made the heat-resistant bricks for the blast shield, or what do you call that? I forget the name.
You mean the tile on the shuttle?
No, not the towel on the shuttle.
The flame bucket.
The flame
Oh,
bucket.
Yes.
Oh, okay. No, you're absolutely correct. And I actually have one of those from pad 34.
Wow, okay.
I actually have one of those. And it's marked that way. I'm glad you mentioned that.
AP green.
Pardon me?
AP green, that's it.
I believe it's AP green.
It is, yes.
Yes.
I couldn't remember.
I'd have to dig it out and find it, but I think the museum has one of those.
I think Eagle Picture may be batteries.
You know, this segues into something that I always like to say, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I like to tell everybody this whenever they come in the museum and I have an opportunity to talk to them about it. I do tend to get a little political occasionally. But I will say this, a lot of people really feel like that the money that's spent on space exploration is a total and complete waste. That we just bundle it up, fire it up into space, and it's burnt up in the sun. Nothing could be farther from the truth. The fact is that NASA builds very, very little equipment for themselves. It is built by contractors who win bids, who have employees who go to work every day and they get paid from these contracts. They go home and they pay taxes on their wages, which in turn go back and fund the program. During the Apollo program, every state, did you hear me? Every state got a piece of the pie. Every state. There is an economic study, and I forget exactly where it is, but it says this, that for every $1 bill that NASA spends on research and we spend on space exploration, we receive, are you ready for this? $7 worth of benefit. Got one of these? Thank these guys. Got contact lenses? NASA technology. Okay, freeze-dried food ain't real high on my list either. Graphite fiber? NASA technology. MRIs? They used them to test the welds on the spacecraft. NASA technology. Folks, I'm telling you, if you want to see our economy turn around, get a hold of your local congressman and get us on a fast track to Mars. Is that worth some money there? Get us on a fast track to Mars and you'll see our economy turn around. Okay, I jumped down off my pulpit.
Tell us what you think.
Okay, let me think about it, okay? No.
Eagle Picture made the batteries too for Mercury.
Who did?
Eagle Picture.
Eagle Picture. Do you know who made the core drill that they used on the moon? Do you guys know? Black & Decker. Yeah. Come on, guys. And I got one better than that. I live in little old Bonne Terre, Missouri. My wife works at a handicraft company. They used to make can openers. Ever seen a swing-away can opener? They used to make swing-away can openers. They made enough of them to fill the Grand Canyon 9 times over. They used one on Skylab. So the money gets around, folks. All right, enough of my preaching. Dan, I'm going to kind of turn it back over to you. Do we have any other questions from the floor? Yes. Oh, by the way, just for you guys, most everybody else has heard this, my passion for exploration in space has earned me the nickname of the Reverend of what's happening up there. That came honestly, I didn't come up with that. That came from Charlie Walker. Charlie Walker was the first industrial astronaut. These guys know him well. All right. All right, yes, sir.
How's the Gemini thruster malfunction?
It wasn't built by McDonnell. The question was, why did the thruster on Gemini 8 malfunction?
It got stuck.
It got stuck.
And I told him it was because McDonnell didn't build it. Who did build that?
Rocketdyne.
Was it Rocketdyne that built that?
Lockheed.
Who was it?
Lockheed.
Lockheed built the thruster?
No.
No. The thruster on Gemini, yes. But, oh no, she's taking a picture. She's taking a selfie. All right.
The winning bid, okay.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you so much. You have been an absolutely fabulous audience. Thank you to our illustrious panelists. If you would, please stand. Please stand on the shoulder of giants, folks. Let's give them a big hand.
Everybody hang on for a second. We got more than this. There you go, guys. Oh, thank you. I think I did that right. Here we go. What I'd like to do now, let's go ahead. Albert, can we dim these lights a little bit? I do want to run through this slide really quick. And we
Go ahead,
kind
MC.
of bounced around in them here, but it's really, a lot of these photos came from Fred Bear's collection. Now, it's very funny. I got to tell you this story. Fred Bear works at Boeing. He's being honored over at Boeing tonight for 55 years of service.
Fred Ware.
Okay, my email was wrong. Thank you for the correction. So he had actually came up and posted a comment on our Facebook page about, what, a week ago, Chase? And I'm like, okay, I don't know who this is, so I emailed him. Of course, I didn't hear back, but I know I'm real busy. And lo and behold, I was going through the photos that Mark Nykerville had graciously sent to me a few years ago when we did the Mercury event. And I noticed the name was the same. I'm like, well, this has got to be the same guy. And I didn't know he had worked in the space program. So a lot of these photos of Rose Church and the other ones that you'll see are Fred's pictures. So let me back up a little bit
Would
here.
you fellas like to step out here so you can see these better?
Can you see it
might
okay,
find
Billy?
these
Can you
very
move
interesting.
that light a little bit more, Myron? It's really
real good. Yeah, I can.
Oh, can you see
oh,
more?
that's much
Yeah,
better.
that's great.
All right. I'm going to run back through these really quick.
I can't. I'm moving.
And, all right, so. All right, so I started off, this is the Mercury. You can see the escape tower on top that they were talking about. And those were the Freedom 7, Liberty Bell, Friendship, Aurora, Sigma, and Phase 7 flights. Jump up to Gemini, we had 12 flights. Starting with GT3 was a man. That was the Molly Brown we talked about. An interesting note, we come up to this first patch here in a minute. All the Mercury missions have named, the ships were named. They actually had the name on the side of the capsule. And as it was indicated earlier, the third GT3 was going to be named Molly Brown. Well, they didn't like that. So we went on through GT4. And Gordon Cooper said, hey, we always had patches in the Air Force. Why can't we do a patch? So that's exactly what they did. And for GT5, they designed a patch, and we'll get to that in just a second. This is actually a brochure. This is the cover page that was put out by McDonnell Aircraft on the Gemini, and it describes, I don't have all the pages in here, but it goes through and describes all the systems. I'm going to try and get that posted on our site here pretty soon. That's an image we had up there for a while. It shows you a cutaway Gemini capsule on the adapter section. There's a tube view of the capsule. Now, this is the Regalo wing that I think was mentioned, and also that Earl has on the table back here a model of it. Early on in the design of the Gemini, and was going to use this wing mechanism, and they were going to be able to land, not an ocean landing, but out in the desert or the high desert of California or some other place where they had a nice long stretch. It actually had skids that would deploy, like the X-15. There's a picture of it there being tested. Wheels. Okay, now we're getting into the pictures that Fred had taken so many years ago. And gentlemen, if you want to chime in, this is, I guess, the control room. We talked about this on Tuesday.
Outside the 30-foot chamber.
Looks like the vacuum chamber.
Chamber, okay. Yeah, you can see it to the left of the photo. I don't know all these folks are, working the problem. There's a better picture of the chamber with the capsule and sort of partially destroyed. Is that the adapter section?
Who mentioned earlier that that's still at Boeing?
It is.
Somebody said that was still there.
Yes, it is still there.
It is there.
In fact, it has been reactivated like last year or 2 years ago.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what assembly that is. Looks like the nose section maybe of the capsule.
Looks like the airlock to me.
Okay.
Skylab airlock.
That's Earl Robb in his spacesuit.
Right.
You look pretty good then, Earl.
Actually, Jim Lovell. I like that picture right there.
Who's the expert?
Can't tell. I don't see a name. Anybody tell who that is?
Who is that?
Gene Stern.
Does look like it. Yeah, I think you're right.
There's another angle. Earl, that's the back of the adapter section, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Okay. What are some of the different, can you see